Heraclitus supposedly said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man."
That feels very apt right now, doesn't it? Especially with global trade.
Absolutely. The currents are definitely shifting. Today, we're diving into a really interesting analysis from the Global Trade Research Initiative, GTRI, which was featured in the Times of India.
Right, the one looking at the May 2025 trade data.
Exactly. It focuses specifically on how U.S. tariffs seem to be, well, reshaping China's export game, and crucially, what spillover effects that has for India.
It's a direct look at adaptation under geopolitical pressure.
So our goal here is simple. Unpack the key numbers and insights for you. Think of it as the essential briefing on these economic shifts, really vital stuff if you're following current affairs, maybe for UPSC prep, or just, want to understand what's going on.
Okay, so let's start with China's overall picture in May 25. The report says total exports were $316.2 billion. That's actually up 4.6% from the year before. Up 4.6% overall. Okay, so on the surface, not bad. But the headline number doesn't tell the whole story, does it?
Not at all. The real story is where those exports are going, or rather where they aren't going anymore.
Which brings us to the U.S. market, the tariffs.
Precisely. The data shows a huge drop in China's exports to the U.S.
Yeah.
We're talking a 34.5% plunge in May 2025 compared to May 2024.
Wow, 34.5%. What does that look like in dollar terms?
It's down from $44 billion to just $28.8 billion. That's a massive hole to fill.
A huge chunk of trade just vanishing from one key destination. So if their overall exports are still slightly up, they must be pushing those goods elsewhere. Aggressively, perhaps.
That's exactly what the numbers suggest. There's a clear redirection. Exports to the EU, for instance, jumped 12%. That's up to $49.5 billion.
Okay, Europe's taking some slack. What about closer to home for China?
Big increases there, too. Shipments to the ASEAN bloc went up 15%, reaching $58.4 billion. And significantly for our discussion, exports to India also rose quite a bit.
How much to India?
Up 12.4%, hitting $11.13 billion in May 2025. So a significant portion of that trade, previously bound for the U.S., is now flowing into the EU, Southeast Asia, and, well, India. Did the report mention any potential downsides to this redirection?
Yes, it did raise a flag. The GTRI analysis specifically cautioned about the possibility of an export push by dumping.
Dumping, meaning selling goods below market cost.
Exactly. To quickly gain market share or just offload inventory now blocked from the U.S., it's a potential risk for domestic industries in countries like India receiving these redirected flows. Something to watch.
That makes sense, a necessary caution. Okay, let's switch gears then. What did the report say about India's side of the trade equation in May? Imports, for example.
India's total merchandise imports actually dipped slightly, down 1.8% year-on-year to $60.6 billion.
A small decrease. Why was that?
The report suggests it was mostly due to lower imports of volatile items, like petroleum and gold.
Right, those can swing quite a bit.
Yeah.
So what happens if you take those out of the calculation?
Then the picture changes quite dramatically. If you exclude petroleum, gold, and diamonds, India's imports were actually up by a healthy 12%.
12% growth in core imports. Interesting. What kind of goods are driving that?
It's mainly in electronics and machinery. Electronics imports surged 27.5% to $9.1 billion.
Almost 28% jump in electronics imports. Wow.
And machinery. Machinery and computers, that category is up 22% to $5 billion. So significant increases in key industrial and consumer goods.
And, I guess, connecting this back to China's export shift, where are these electronics and machinery primarily coming from?
You got it. The data shows combined imports from China and Hong Kong into India rose by 22.4% in May. That totals $12 billion.
So it lines up almost perfectly. China redirects exports away from the U.S., and India sees a surge in imports, particularly electronics and machinery, largely sourced from China and Hong Kong.
It paints a very clear picture of that realignment happening in real time.
What about India's own export performance during this time, particularly towards the U.S., given China's retreat there?
That's another interesting piece. India's exports to the U.S. actually saw good growth. They increased by 17.3% in May, reaching $8.8 billion.
So India is gaining some ground in the U.S. market, while China is losing it significantly.
It seems so. The report even highlighted smartphones as a key driver for India's export growth to the U.S.
Fascinating contrast. So stepping back, what's the overarching implication of all these moving parts?
Well, it definitely highlights the ongoing persistence of U.S.-China trade friction and how it forces adjustments across the globe. India is clearly part of that adjustment.
And there are other global factors at play too, right?
Absolutely. The report also wisely flags the broader uncertainty. Think about the escalating conflicts in the Middle East, Iran, Israel, Hamas, the Houthis affecting shipping. That adds another layer of risk to supply chains and energy prices.
Making an already complex situation even more volatile. So what's the takeaway for India from this GTRI analysis? What's the advice?
The key message seems to be vigilance. Keep a close eye on potential dumping, yes, but also prioritize balanced trade deals and, maybe most importantly, focus on strengthening India's own business environment and competitiveness. Be prepared. Be strong.
Makes sense. Strengthen the foundations to navigate the choppy waters.
Precisely.
So it's clear these global trade routes aren't fixed maps. They're more like rivers, constantly carving new paths under pressure. And India's trade landscape is actively adapting to these powerful geopolitical and economic currents.
A period of significant flux.
Definitely. Which leaves us with a crucial question to think about, especially for you listening. Given these shifts, China needing new markets, India importing more key inputs but also facing dumping risks. Plus, all the global uncertainty, how can India best navigate this? How does it balance grabbing the opportunities, like potentially cheaper inputs or gaps in the U.S. market, while protecting its own industries and building resilience against these wider disruptions?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question for policymakers and businesses right now.
Indeed. We hope this deep dive, drawing on that GTRI report via the Times of India, has helped clarify some of these complex dynamics. Understanding this is so important, whether for exams like UPSC or just staying informed. If you found this useful, do give us a like and subscribe.
And please share any further questions or your own thoughts on this topic in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.